This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. Haley Buick GMC, the place for a new Verano or Terrain Denali, in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosting an array of events from Civil War reenactments to diesel truck pulls. More information online at virginiarodeo.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. So what do you do? Information about getting involved in advanced technology careers, making everything from clean energy to life-saving medicine, is available at dreamitdoitvirginia.com. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and welcome to three very special, unique guests who are going to help inform our viewers about the SOLs in Virginia. Really appreciate your being here. Sarah Gross with Virginia PTA, Meg Gruber with VEA, and Steve Staples with VASS. And we will tell them as you move along what VASS is. But I've asked the three of you to have some opening statements about SOLs and about reforms that will be coming up, and then I'm looking forward to your conversing on the subject. So who would want to start? Meg, let me just start with you.
Hi, I'm Meg Gruber, President of the Virginia Education Association, and it certainly appears that everyone wants to reform the SOLs. And we're excited about having this opportunity to hopefully do it right. We need to kind of keep two things in mind. First, we're really talking about the first step is reforming the testing of the standards, and then hopefully down the road looking at the standards themselves. So pretty much when right now we talk about reforming SOLs, we're talking about testing. And second, we're hoping that the reforms will be basically very general, because we think the real challenge is to get it right when we have such an opportunity. We think that the General Assembly should establish a commission of primarily practitioners, those of us in the classroom who actually work with the children every day. And we think that it should have some broad goals, basically to increase instructional time and to take the emphasis on testing, so the tests no longer drive the curriculum, but we actually teach and then let the tests measure what we teach.
Okay, thank you for that opening statement. Sarah?
Thank you. I'm Sarah Gross. I'm the chair of the Legislation and Education Committee for the Virginia PTA. Virginia PTA and its parent and teacher members have long believed that the sum total of a school's success and a child's success is more than just the score on a test. Parents across the Commonwealth are becoming, and have been for some time, extremely concerned about the amount of testing that happens in the schools, the singular focus of education now as how their children perform on the test, and at the same time concerns that a teacher's capabilities are being measured by how well students do on a test. The incredible pressure that's put on our students and teachers to perform really seems to take away from the organic process of teaching. As early as first grade, students are coming home learning about strategies for a test. We hear stories about them in the spring, kids coming home jangled, their nerves jangled, their they're bored, they're overwhelmed, and worst of all, they're scared. They're scared because that test score is the only thing that we have now to, and we rely so heavily on it. PTA believes that the measure of a student's success and a school's success should be based on a wide variety of measures, and that there's much more involved in understanding how well a student does than just how well they take a test. We also agree with VEA that the General Assembly is not necessarily the place to have these reforming discussions, that our teachers and administrators are those that are the most skilled to better understand how to effectively measure our students. We hope that some of the things that come out of this are a reduction in the numbers of tests, and perhaps testing in a way that isn't overwhelming. We hear stories of students sitting for 5, 6, 7 hours at a time taking a test, and some of those are in elementary school. So, there are grassroots organizations and parent groups across the Commonwealth talking a lot about returning to a more common sense approach to testing, a more balanced view of testing. So we're hopeful that, that some of that comes out of these important discussions.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Dave, thank you. Steve Staples, the Virginia Association of School Superintendents.
That's what VASS is.
That is VASS, yes, thank you. And Meg and Sarah really, I think, bracketed the issues pretty well. Our sense is that there are two pieces to this whole SOL reform initiative. Meg spoke to the first one, and that's reforming the standards. When we talk with teachers, what we hear is too many, just so many standards that we spend all of our time just trying to get coverage, and so we get great breadth, not as much depth. That's not an area that superintendents have worked with as closely. We're kind of leaving that to the content experts on the other side, but it's got to happen. We think that's important. The piece we've really focused on is the assessment and accountability piece, how we test those standards, and then what happens with the results of those tests. And I think we've got to say that Virginia's system has been around since the mid-90s. Well, we predated the federal government's focus on assessment and accountability, and it's done some great things. It's given us some continuity in the curriculum around the state. It's allowed teachers to examine some data. It's identified subgroups where we're having issues. So it's not a matter that the current system is a bad system. It's just a dated system. And since the mid-90s, we've learned some things about teaching and learning and assessment and accountability. And we believe those ought to be folded into the next round of reforms that give us an accountability system we think that's better positioned for now and not 1995.
So am I trying to pull together what the three of you are saying? Is there a common agreement that what should come out of this 2014 session is a commission, a study? Because there may be legislators introducing a bill to do this, do that, and do this part, but you're looking for something more comprehensive and to have
Yes.
studied.
We are. Dave, I think we'd be short-sighted to believe that we could completely reform and build a comprehensive, meaningful system in a month. It's going to take a while, and we're going to need to examine lots of viewpoints. So I know from our association's viewpoint, we'd be very supportive of the nominating or the creation of a task force or a commission to really study the issue for the next General Assembly session, 2015. Doesn't mean we won't do anything now.
Right.
Lots of good ideas for the short term, but long term, actually creating a new system, I think is going to take some time.
Yeah, I agree with Steve. I think we run into problems when even in a long session for a General Assembly, there's so many bills, so many ideas. And I think this is such a great opportunity to actually make changes that are meaningful and that we get them right the first time. Because if we don't, then it's very hard to go back and fix it again and fix it again. So I think it really does need really thoughtful process that can't always happen when legislators are putting in a number of different bills sort of on the same topic, and then they start combining the bills. Right. And we want to make really high quality sausage.
And Sarah, parents have been upset as well as teachers and administrators for some time, so are they willing to wait for a study?
I think so. I think that parents are also hopeful that there may be some, and Virginia PTA hopeful that there may be some, local control options that are available. I know most districts have 9 weeks tests and assessment tests, and we think that there might be an opportunity to look at things in a more local solution for our parents, but that we understand that schools are going to test our children. So, but as the conversation begins to develop, we hope to continue to be able to play a part in that.
So on the issue of local control, is that something that legislators might even address now, or what? Or are you hoping that everything is going to be put into one big comprehensive study?
Well, I think part of what Sarah's talking about with local control is it goes back to the high stakes of the state tests, because when you have such pressure put on for a test result, then what you find is the school systems obviously want to make sure their children are going to do well on that high stakes test. So then they start, well, we have to start breaking up things, and we've got to test and test and test and measure and measure and measure to make sure they're ready. And I think that's where the local control is having some of the school systems say, we know our teachers are going to test our children. We know our teachers are doing a good job. We don't have to over-test them at the local level to get them ready for the state test.
Yeah, and I think that certainly part of what superintendents are talking about is broadening the types of assessments. Right now, we have a single assessment that drives our entire accountability system. If it's not an SOL test, then it doesn't really count. And certainly SOL tests have a place. That's an important part of the accountability system. But our objection is it's not the only piece of the accountability system. Our teachers are out spending a lot of time learning, for example, project-based learning. And it's really a very dynamic learning process. We're excited about it. How does an SOL test really assess project-based learning? Probably not very well.
No.
So that whole segment of the teaching learning process isn't assessed by SOLs. Well, the locals ought to be able to come up with an assessment that says, how are we doing in this area? And that ought to be something that's considered. That's just one example, but I think there's just other ways to look at assessment. And locally created assessments ought to have a place, not the only place, but certainly a place.
And with the stress on the students doing well, then you hear the phrase used accurately or inaccurately that talks about teaching to the test.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the stress that's put on classroom teachers and school systems to really to teach the tests so they'll score well.
Sarah put it well, and I know the PTA probably has a better perspective on this than us, but last year we heard from countless superintendents about children who simply would not give up. So you have an 8-year-old. I'm trying to picture what I was doing at 8 years old. We have an 8-year-old who's engaged in a math test for 7 consecutive hours. They go in and they sit down on the test, and they're taking a silent test. They go to lunch and they eat alone because the test requirements require them to be separated. So they're eating at a table all quiet, and then they come back to the test. School is dismissed, and they continue on the test. Now, those superintendents said, how accurate do you think the result is in hours 5, 6, 7, 8 on an 8-year-old who probably can't watch 10 minutes of a cartoon without losing focus? So, clearly the pressure of testing is driving some things in schools that I don't think anybody feels good about.
No. I can say I'm a high school science teacher, and when you're dealing with high school children, you see those that will not give up because they want everything to be right. And then you see the others who after 5 or 10 minutes are like, well, I don't really care, I'm done. And so when the state, for example, deals with averages of how long it takes a child to take a test, well, an average is just that. It takes those that are really committed, but the truth, so to speak, of that is being brought down by, I've had students who put their heads down and want to go to sleep and say, well, I can take as long as I want. I'll get around to it. No, not in my room you won't, but that's a whole different issue. So when you're dealing with high school kids, they have interesting way to be resistant to the concept of constantly being tested.
You know, when I was talking with your colleague, Rob Jones,
Yes.
about this program, and Rob helped in brainstorming on it, he was saying the legislature certainly will need to involve someone from the federal level on this,
Right.
because there are certain things that, even though, as you were saying, that we go way back to the 90s, before federal, before federal
That's right.
requirements,
That's right.
that there are some federal requirements that you
Sure.
can't just dispense with at the state level. And so that's going to add another factor. Of the type testing that you're talking about, what you were just illustrating, help our viewers and help me understand, how much of it is really state mandated, and what portions of it do you see as really federal?
Yeah. Dave, that's an interesting
Yeah.
question, because it really depends upon your definition. Federal government requires us to test in many areas at many benchmark paths along a student's educational career, but it doesn't say it has to be an SOL test. Commonwealth of Virginia controls how we respond to that federal mandate. Right now, we give 34 SOL exams to a student, minimally, grades 3 through 11. That's the fewest number they can take. At best, the federal government mandates half of those, at best. Now, we can make an argument that not even that many are mandated, because you could use other assessments along the way. But for our viewers' perspective, maybe the simplest way to say it is, right now, 17 tests would have to be given mandated by the federal government. Virginia's chosen to give 34. So we test twice as much as is required by the feds.
And I think parents would like to see the test, knowing that a test needs to be administered as part of our accountability system. Having it simply just be a part of the educational process, not driving the educational process. I mean, our teachers and our students are chained to pacing charts and modules,
Yes.
and it's literally squeezing the creativity out of the classroom. My daughter's in 6th grade now, but when she was in 4th grade, she had a student a bright student who came into school on the day of the test and had made a decision ahead of time that she was going to purposely fail, get every question on the SOL wrong. And as in her 4th grade mind, she felt that this would send a message to these people who make them take the tests that the test is inconsequential. It's not a measure of how smart she is. And I thought that one of the most telling pieces of the story was listening to her talk about it. She said she employed the backwards of all the strategies that she had learned, that she knew 3 answers would be wrong. So, you know, we've sort of put our kids into this position where, you know, they feel shackled to this test. And they know that it's not, they're starting to really understand it's not a real assessment of how smart they are. And then there are all those students who, when they don't do well, internalize that they're not doing well. And that's a really tragic outcome of what should just be a standardized test.
Well, and I think, following up on Sarah's comment, one of the problems is that we tend to force kids into taking the test during a statewide testing window. Now, there's some flexibility within a 2 or 3 week period, but the bottom line is, here's Meg, a science teacher, and she knows that half her class has actually prepared for and is all ready to take that test in January. Oh, but that's not the testing window. So they've got to wait. But then there are other segments of the class where we're saying, oh, they're probably not ready in April. They might be ready in May or June. So what we're doing is not allowing students to engage in the curriculum in a way that says, I'm prepared and ready for this now. It would be like setting 3 weeks where you could go take your driver's test. And that's it. During those 3 weeks. If you're not ready, too bad. Or if you're ready ahead of time, too bad. You got to wait. So we're saying it doesn't really make sense to test students when they're not prepared for the curriculum. We want them to be prepared. So I think that's part of the problem that Sarah's running into. That student probably said, I could have taken this test back in October. I'm ready.
You know, annually when there's the discussion and debate about giving localities the option of when to start school, one hears the comment that, well, some school systems have more teaching days before they have to take certain tests. Of course, that doesn't win the day and get localities all the option to set their own starting time. But if there's some tests that come fairly early and you can start a week earlier, then I suppose, is it possible that some schools in the western part of the state, particularly with more snow and been able to start earlier, that they have an edge over others?
Not so much for the SOLs, because the state will slide that window to accommodate for that. But on the national tests, on an advanced placement or an IB, that's one of our big arguments for when schools open. We're compared to other states or other nations, but we really don't have the same number of instructional days in, and so it's an interesting comparison. So I don't think that would be as big an issue SOL-wise, but certainly for some tests that we think are important factors in assessing how well students are doing, it could be a big factor.
I think one of the most telling things that you've said in this era when people of all political persuasions attack what happens on the other side of the Potomac in Washington, that our viewers have heard, and I'm just saying it again for them, that half of those tests are required by the federal government. The additional half are a part of the state requirement.
Yes, they are. It's almost like if you test once, then obviously 3 times must be better. And it really isn't, but it's kind of that attitude. And, you know, we have such a proponent of collecting data that I think what Sarah talks about, you know, with her story, and I've had the opportunity as VEA president to meet some students at VCU, and they've come up and they told me, you know, I'm really kind of struggling. And I said, why? And they said, well, I'm so good at taking a multiple choice test, but I don't have hardly any multiple choice tests in college. And it really, you know, and as a teacher, that really hit me hard. I mean, I'm apologizing to this 20-year-old at VCU, and he says, well, it's not your fault. You're doing what you were told to do. I said, yes, but I still feel responsible that we as a profession can't do everything we need to prepare you because we are tied to all of these tests and prepping you for tests, which is not what he needs to be a successful adult in college and in life. I mean, how many multiple choice tests do you take? None?
Yeah. I'm thinking of the old pogo line, we've met the enemy and he is us. We've created our own monster in a way. And I think it has a lot of unanticipated repercussions.
Yes.
Part of the reason we have so many tests is our teachers have been convinced that without that SOL test, their content isn't as meaningful or as important. In other words, if my area is tested, then that's important. If my area isn't tested, then it's not important. So when we talk about even eliminating tests, teachers might rally against it to say, well, we don't want you to eliminate the test. They don't really want the test, but they're afraid it would diminish the importance of their content if there's no SOL test hanging out there. And that's why I think broadening that array. I'm a social studies teacher by trade before I became one of these crazy administrators. And I don't know that the SOL exam is what I would say the best way to measure proficiency, knowledge, depth of understanding of social studies. It's what we use because it's what we've got. But there's got to be another way to do that.
Yes.
So in our closing minute, let's name other organizations that you all think should be a part of this study. And let me start off by saying, clearly, I think Virginia School Counselors Association should be involved, the School Boards Association. The room's not big enough to have everyone in this room. But when the study, what are some of the other, name some of the other organizations that you all think should be represented when this study occurs?
Well, we have a small group that's been meeting for almost a year just to talk about ideas on assessment accountability. And not seated in this room, you mentioned the School Boards Association, both principals associations, secondary and elementary, you know, very important to that. I think our perspective would be even outside of education. There's some folks, I think having a few higher ed representatives who understand research, data, real scientific would be helpful. And then certainly the business community, because much of what we assess is about our ability to do workforce development. I'd like to know what they're looking for.
All right.
Yes.
Well, really appreciate the three of you starting some conversation with our viewers and helping them understand. We'll encourage them to stay tuned during the session to see what takes place, and hopefully then, as you said, it'll be moving forward toward the 2015 session to do something really significant. So, Sarah, Meg, Steve, thank you all very
Thank
much
you.
for being on
Thank
This
you.
Week in
Thank you.
Richmond.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Enjoy being with you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. Haley Buick GMC, the place for a new Verano or Terrain Denali, in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosting an array of events from Civil War reenactments to diesel truck pulls. More information online at virginiarodeo.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. So what do you do? Information about getting involved in advanced technology careers, making everything from clean energy to life-saving medicine, is available at dreamitdoitvirginia.com. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.